Welcome to the first episode of the Butterfly Podcast. Our guest today is Josh Robinson, Chief Architect and Co-founder at Butterfly Protocol, where we'll be diving into the tech behind Butterfly. What situation was the catalyst behind Butterfly Protocol?
The reason we created the Butterfly Protocol is we're building a number of different Dapps and things in the crypto space, and we had some customers in different countries where it was hard for them to get access to some of our content, and there's between countries censoring things, and then everything in the news about lately with a lot of different social platforms censoring different individuals and different views that are different from their own. We thought we had a way to create a censorship resistant system where people won't have those problems where someone's domain name, which they might have everything linked to, could just be taken away, where you don't have to worry about forgetting to renew your domain and you miss a $15 payment and your site is stolen by someone else who snatches it up.
How expansive can the scope of Butterfly Protocol be?
Yeah, so on the initial phase and some of the first things we focused on were just tying names to some sort of data and a record where you could look something up and see where that name pointed. So depending on what the context is, whether that's a wallet, a web page, a specific file. And as we were building out some different things on top of that initial concept, we found we needed to build a little bit more in order to make it really censorship resistant and make sure that it was kind of bulletproof, and store some of that content that really shouldn't live on a blockchain, because blockchains are very good for storing small amounts of information and things like ownership and transferring that ownership around, but they're not good for storing large amounts of content in most cases. Most of the current blockchains are not. So we wanted to make something as efficient as we could for not just finding data, but also spreading that data, whatever that format might be, whether that's structured data or whether it's files and different website assets, spreading that around using IPFS and having a way to control the versions on that and have an updatable layer that allows the owner of a domain or namespace to update those records and share that, and people to be able to see what the most current version is and look through history as well.
All right, so is that why you guys started with a social media messaging Dapp? Was because that's sort of the best way to show a proof of concept, because social media requires large amounts of data storage and things like that?
Yeah, it was creating a social app was a good test case for the technology to make sure that we covered all the different aspects we needed. First of all, you're trying to find somebody in the feed of posts that they're creating, but then you'll again have to store the data somewhere, and you might want to edit or update. So it provided a way to get to our initial vision of censorship resistant. Having free speech is an important one of the main aspects of that. So having a censorship resistant social app was kind of just fit for what we were doing, and it was able to to test all the different cases and help us build a platform that really supported some interesting dApps that could be built.
We know that Butterfly Protocol is a more expansive project than just a social media application. So can you explain how that top-level domain and subdomain system will kind of work?
Yeah, so the majority of the top-level domains are part of the DAO governance contract that we have built. That's all managed through the BFly tokens. There are a handful, I think specifically 21 TLDs that we reserve for internal uses, things like test networks and like accounts. But everything besides that, those internal ones are handled through the governance contract. So you can spend starting out at 10,000 BFly tokens to sponsor a TLD, and then it goes down over time, and those 10,000 tokens are burned, and a new batch of ERC20s are created for that TLD that go through an auction process and are also shared between the BFly holders and the person sponsoring that TLD. So what those tokens allow you to do once the auction process is all over and everybody's claimed their sub BFly tokens, that allows those owners of those to register domains under that TLD. And the same process of owning and creating ERC20 tokens for any specific name that belong to that goes all the way down the tree. So if you have a subdomain off of one of those domains that you bought, you're able to create easily a bunch of ERC20 tokens that you can use for any different application, but also you can use them to sell domains, subdomains off of whichever domain you own. For example, I might, if there's a TLD someone sponsors called family, I might get and register Robinson, so Robinson.family off of that. And there's a lot of Robinsons out there, so a lot of them I don't know, but I can make those other domains and those tokens available through anything that's ERC20 compatible. People, I give a bunch to the relatives I know, and they could send it to someone else, and then we could have long lost cousins registering Bob.Robinson.family.
I'd like to hear how this would look from a commercial perspective. Let's use an example of the top-level domain .cars that local car dealerships are using to list their vehicles on Butterfly. How would that work?
There's a couple different ways you can manage the subdomains. You can also, because each domain at every level is a ERC 721 as well, and it has a bunch of ERC20s attached to it, or it can. There's a lot of different ways that could be structured, but the initial top level domain would have a sponsor, and then the dealerships would be able to bid on the auction, or later get those sub BFly tokens for that cars domain on different exchanges. But once they've acquired enough to register their dealership at .cars, then they would be able to spend those and register that subdomain or that domain off of the cars top level domain. And at that point, they would have full control of that dealership.cars and be able to do what they want with it. Even if they want to do something kind of unique, if they wanted to create subdomains off of that for each car, they'd actually be able to do that and have a ERC 721 token that represents a car if they want to, and maybe even ownership. There's all sorts of cool things that could be done in the future with that.
All right. And And how would this domain system work on the Butterfly social media application?
Yeah, so um, the way it works is the kind of bigger system beyond the domain part of Butterfly has a bunch of different services. So right now, that's posting articles and having different feeds. And at each of those services, a developer, like we built out the social app, are able to tie in with those APIs that feed off of the blockchain and synchronize all the updates from the different users. So for the different use cases, it's easy to extend that platform and add additional services. So it depends on what kind of information you're wanting to store, but new services could be added for something like a site where it stores the content. So when someone goes to a specific domain and they're trying to find the website for that, they can get that and all the assets associated. And then they'd also be able to, if the dealership has a blog, they'd be able to see articles, they'd be able to use that service. And then other services will be added in the future, possibly specific to things like those, like use cases like car dealership or a family's website or any number of different things.
All right, so speaking of the future, what makes the tech stack on Butterfly Protocol scalable and future-proof?
And so primarily we're built on Ethereum, and we stick to what Ethereum does well. So in ownership, specifically of those ERC 721 tokens that represent each specific domain, and the sub BFly tokens and the governance of that. So in ownership, and because you're not going to be transferring ownership of a name that frequently, even at its current level, Ethereum can easily handle those types of transfers because it's not something that you're doing at a very fast pace. Most of that fast paced things like the updates happens in a combination of off-chain and on-chain. So you have immediate off-chain signatures that update any bits of content in those different services we talked about. And then that can be synced with the chain. And although the data is made available and propagated over IPFS, so as long as there's somebody who cares about the data and is holding on to it somewhere, it is going to be available. And with using IPFS, it makes basically a large single drive out of all the different nodes connected. So nearly infinite scalability on the data storage side there, while also allowing old data to drop off if there is something that nobody cares about having it around anymore. In order to make sure everything responds quickly, we have already built out some different indexers which will watch the blockchain for that ownership information and can sync the different updates done in the off-chain piece, those commits of data, and any updates are on-chain, and add faster indexing to those. And the indexers are set up so that anyone can run one, and eventually you'll be able to scope to just their needs. So if you have a specific domain or service on the Butterfly platform that you need to make sure is always up and performant, you're able to run one as a company, a node that's scoped to that specific piece. Even as an individual, you'd be able to run a node locally and scope to just your information if that's what you wanted to do.
All right, and so you think that all of these features can be used extensively, not only for the domain and subdomain registration we've talked about earlier, but for innovators and creators and app integration on the Butterfly protocol?
Yeah, I think we have two, at the very minimum, you could say we have two different pieces of the kind of Dapp development stack kind of built out already. Then you take in all the smaller pieces, and it makes it a lot easier to build things out, because we have the data storage, which on a regular blockchain is very difficult to do. But you can control the ownership and the linking and being able to discover that data, uh, using the DNS type system, the naming system, and then have fast scalable updates that are synchronized and scoped. So um, the services we've already built out, which the services are basically just kind of defining a schema for a specific type of data. It's easy to add new ones, but even the ones we've built so far, you can build quite a few different application types on top of. And so, yeah, it makes for a very robust system.
And from a user's perspective, you spoke about free speech earlier. Will Butterfly be like most other blockchain services that's pseudo anonymous?
Yeah. So whenever everything on Butterfly is linked to your public key, so we want people to be able to say whatever they want, but we definitely don't want to become a bastion for illegal things or unsavory types. Um, so we don't do anything to expose identities, but we don't do anything to hide them either. So you are linked to, if you have a key that you own a specific domain, if you do things with that key elsewhere, that's kind of outside of the scope of what Butterfly can protect. You can say whatever you want. It can't be taken down. But yeah, that doesn't mean that we specifically provide, any kind of separation from that key and you if you're, purchasing tokens somewhere else on a KYC system, things like that.
All right. And on the Butterfly Protocol.io website, there's a mention of a browser extension. Can you sort of go into how that browser extension will work and what sort of features it'll have?
Yeah, so that's going to be one of the first client side things that for a regular user outside of the social app, and it'll be more generic. So as I was mentioning, we'll probably be adding a site type service. So the basic functionality of the extension in the initial versions will add, similar to you have a HTTP : you'll have a bproto : you can put in the domain and it will load the site. It will also facilitate some of the other services. So being able to connect into those articles and different things that are stored on the back end of Butterfly, that whoever is creating an app, you'll be able to provide the interface and then connections to some of that data on the back end too.
So do you see a potential for Butterfly to expand and integrate enough apps and uses and features for it to almost be like a blockchain G Suite?
Yeah, we plan on building out a number of different, again, the services types, and then also applications around that, similar to the social one that we did. The very nice thing about the way Butterfly works is, even though we built kind of the structure and interface and app for the social app, anyone can use those same APIs and integrate them into other things. So we do plan on building out a number of different use cases, things like code storage, again, sites, social articles are just some of the initial ones, because we make it easy to create ERC20s at any of the domains. We might have a token factory, TLD, that we and services around that, pointing to wallets. There's quite a few that we have ideas for, and we'll be, as we go forward, picking the best ones, building reference applications for, and kind of building the framework for people to build on top of that as well.
Where does Butterfly go tech-wise after its token sale launch?
Yeah, so basically, what I was just kind of talking about, there's a lot of different types of services and small additions we can do to that overall framework, adding different service types and building reference applications that for different use cases. And as always, there's work to do, scaling some of the things up, making sure we run some different nodes that keep everything going and operating smoothly. We already have quite a bit done as far as the ability to deploy using some DevOps things, Dockerized, different Dockerized nodes, and building out, expanding that, refining everything, creating new and improved UIs for all the different aspects.
Yeah, could you go into sort of that relationship with Docker and Kubernetes and some of the other stuff within the tech stack?
Yeah, so our overall tech stack for the indexers, most of the system is, the backbone is done on Ethereum, but we have our indexer service that does run in a Docker container, and works with a database. Right now, it's using OrangoDB as the database. On the back end, it uses GraphQL to interact with that, so any apps can plug into that. It's a nice scalable database. The overall system is flexible enough that we could use different indexing systems if we need to. But we have different Kubernetes scripts to take the Dockerized indexer, as well as different Ethereum nodes and IPFS nodes set up as clusters to kind of deploy any of that to a Kubernetes host cluster, and kind of manage and scale that entire system. So if someone's familiar with Kubernetes, they'd be able to take those scripts and set their specific settings, like how many nodes they want, and deploy it in a few minutes.